Welcome to the Friends of the Key West Library 2022 Speaker Series. This is number 7 in our series. Number 8 will be next week in our library's Palm Garden and will feature Les Standiford. We're going to start that event at 5:45 so we can squeeze in our super short but very important annual meeting first. If you missed the other presentations, almost all of them are posted as videos on our YouTube channel, and that's at the Friends of the Library website. I have to do a little bit of housekeeping. The Friends is a not-for-profit organization that is separate from the library itself. Our mission is to raise funds for the library and awareness of the library's superb collections and services. Last year, the Friends donated $50,000 to help support the library, funds that we raised through your memberships, book sales, and other donations. Donations given by you, the Friends, go directly into building the library's collection, including materials for the young adult and the children's departments, supporting our Florida History Department, and special projects such as Mango, which is a learning language resource, and Canopy, a streaming service. Our speaker series is always free, but we sure do thank you for your donations tonight, which help in defraying the expenses of this program. Now, if you are not yet a member of the Friends, we invite you to join us. You can do this at our website, friendsofthekeywestlibrary.org. Charlaine's books will be available for purchase thanks to our local bookstore, Books and Books, and you will find links both on the website and in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. This is also where you can post questions for Charlaine, and we welcome all of them. Emily Berg, who is a board member and the manager of Books and Books, will be joining us later to help moderate the questions. So I think that's all the business I have to cover. Tonight, we are so lucky to have the talented and prolific author Charlaine Harris as our speaker. I'm not going to list everything she's written because you don't want to listen to me all night. We want to hear from her, but we'll be hearing about lots of them. She started her career with 2 standalone novels and then pivoted to a cozy mystery series featuring librarian Aurora Teagarden. That was followed by a series featuring a cleaning lady with a dark history, Lily Bard. Next came the Sookie Stackhouse series, AKA the Southern Vampire Mysteries, on which the HBO series True Blood was based. There are more, but we'll get to them. She's had 2 other series developed for TV, Aurora Teagarden on Hallmark and Midnight Texas on NBC. And she's worked on graphic novels and short story collections and had several books developed into video games. She's had an astonishing career, and I'm happy to say, as far as I can tell, it's not gone to her head. So please help me welcome Charlaine Harris.
Hi, Roberta.
There she is. We're so glad to have you here.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
Well, you're a big deal, so it was a really big pleasure for us to have you agree to join us. So I have lots and lots of questions, but we'll see what else Emily comes up with too and where our conversation takes us. But I wanted to start at the very beginning. I don't know a lot about the 2 standalone novels, which you're welcome to tell us about, but it seems like the cozy mystery series that featured the librarian Aurora Teagarden was when things really started to take off. So I wonder if you could talk about that series and where it came from, and have you always been a fan of mysteries and that kind of thing?
Okay. Well, yes, I have always been a fan of mysteries. That was what my parents read mostly. So that was what was around for me to read. And even as a child, I was a voracious reader and I read way beyond my age limit. I'm sure many of our listeners tonight have had the same experience.
Mhm.
My first two books were standalone mysteries for Houghton Mifflin. But Houghton Mifflin, by the time I came back from my sabbatical having babies, Houghton Mifflin wasn't publishing mysteries anymore. So I was casting around to find a place for my series, and I had gotten an agent by then. And it seemed to me that if I wrote about librarians, maybe libraries would buy the books.
Smart. Very smart.
So just, I'm just going, please someone buy my books. And my mother was a librarian. So, that just seemed like a natural thing to me. So I started writing about Aurora, and reading the first books now, they seem a little dated because Aurora was very much a character of the cusp between the Old South and the New South, and the tensions in her life were those tensions. I think you can tell I wrote that series over a big span of years.
Right.
Because the first ones are really a different world, and the last two are firmly in the present. I wrote those after a long break from the series. So that's kind of the series you can gauge my progression as a human being and as a writer, if they're not the same progression. But anyway, that you can tell. And it was a long series for me.
Okay, so when you say there were several that came later, did your publisher ask you to do those, or you wanted to go back to them? I was curious about the break.
Well, I quit writing them because I can't even remember why I quit writing. Well, I started writing the Sookies and they took off. But after a while, it seemed to me like I would enjoy writing another Aurora, especially when I quit writing the Sookies. I was casting around for what to do. And I thought, well, it would be nice to do something comfortable and so completely different, kind of go back to my roots, see Aurora now, see what she's doing. I love to visit my characters unexpectedly. So I dropped in on her and found out she was pregnant. And so it was a lot of fun to write those two books, but that was the reason for the gap. I was just too busy with other stuff.
Okay. Well, let's move to some of your other books. I have to confess, I don't write science fiction or urban fantasy, nor do I read a lot of it. So I have been reading this book most recently, which is An Easy Death. And I know about the Sookie books, and it occurred to me finally that these are entirely different worlds. It's not like writing a cozy mystery novel where, of course, there's a world. In my books, there's the world of Key West, but there's nothing unusual about it. Whereas you have to come up with a whole different world with all sets of rules. So like Gunny Rose, you have a different alternate reality where America is not the same America that we know because Franklin Roosevelt was assassinated. And there are wizards and magic and lots of gunfighting and violence. And for the Sookie vampire books, your protagonist can read other people's thoughts and vampires show up. So I'm getting to the question, I promise. I read on your website or in one of the interviews I listened to that you don't outline books in advance. So I'm curious about these worlds. Do you at least know about the geography and what the history and the rules are, and then set the characters loose, or how does that work?
Um, it doesn't work very well sometimes. I can't write any other way. I tried outlining and it just took all the fun out of writing for me. It was like painting by numbers. So I went back to my old loosey-goosey way of saying, what's going to happen today? Like today, I thought, well, this is boring. I've got to kill someone or blow something up. And then the book starts to be exciting. And you thought, okay, why are these people pulling into town in these covered trucks? Why are they here? Why are they armed? What's going to happen? Except, bodies are going to hit the ground, because that's Gunny Rose's business, is to make the bodies hit the ground. So building the world is fun, but I really dislike being completely pinned down. However, it's weird, people who read your books really want to have the exact information. So I had to pin myself down with a map, which is in the second or third book of America as It Is Now. But that was a lot of fun. When I was doing the Sookie books, my assistant and I spent a couple of days doing an elaborate map of Bonton, Louisiana. And that was a lot of fun too. It's always good to find a great excuse to take a day out for her.
Absolutely.
But inventing the world is part of the fun for me. I really resisted in the Midnight Texas series started off to not have any supernatural characters in it. And then all of a sudden I got to a scene and the cat spoke. And I thought, the cat talks? Oh no, I said I wasn't going to have anything magical in this series. But it was just too good. I couldn't let go. And if you have a talking
cat, no idea
cat,
about that. You didn't know that ahead of time.
I didn't know that ahead of time, but when it happened, it was just perfect. And I thought, okay, so there's magic here. I might as well just go full tilt magic. So every day is kind of a revelation to me and a learning curve, which I like.
Yes, well, it keeps you going over a long career.
It does. 41 years.
That's unbelievable. We're going to get to that. But so there's a whole literature of vampire fiction. Are there things that you're obligated to have your vampires do that urban fantasy audience expects?
I think you can change the mythology to suit your story to some extent. Some writers even have vampires as daywalkers, which is, the original Dracula was a daywalker.
Uh-huh.
Stoker didn't have him just coming out at night, but now that's considered very almost unthinkable to have daywalking vampires. So mine weren't, but there were some traditions like they can't cross running water, and I'm going, I cannot come up with anything to justify that, any mythology that would explain that, except people wanting to think once they crossed a stream, they were safe. So it was just a question of trial and error.
Well, for our audience who doesn't know you, well, they may know that you're a wonderful writer, but what I wanted to get across that you're also very down to earth and a lot of fun. So when I was on the planning committee for the New England Crime Bake, which is a small mystery conference.
Yeah.
And in 2010, we had you, Charlaine, as our guest of honor. So one thing that we always did, which was a lot of fun, is to figure out the theme. So of course, when you were there, it was going to be the vampire theme. And there was a costume contest and a dance party at the vampire ball. And yes. So I have our backstage guy, Bob, who's going to show us a few pictures from that, because I thought you'd get a kick out of thinking back to them. Okay, Bob.
Aww.
So this is Charlaine, obviously on the left, and her very good friend Dana, and Pat Remick, who was one of the co-chairs that year. And we'll go to the next slide. You ready, Bob? Okay, there we go. So this is also Charlaine with her good friend Tony and Tony's daughter Valerie. And if you look closely, you'll see that Charlaine's got fangs. So you're beginning to see she'll fall right into the fun.
Sure.
All right, next. And this is an example of one of the costumes. People have so much fun and are so creative. This is Betsy Bittner. I think she's a vampire. You probably would know better than me, Charlaine.
Oh, she's got horns.
Okay, okay. So she might be a devil. All right, let's look at the next one. This is one of our New England rock stars, Hank Ryan, and her husband, and also Tony's daughter, Valerie. And I think that they must have won the costume contest because he's clutching a bottle of vampire wine, which somebody found somewhere and we used as a prize. Okay. Next.
Oh, they look fabulous.
This is Janet Halpin, who was a vampire bride who didn't make it to the altar, I don't think. Okay, and the next. This is Charlaine cutting the first rug out there by herself, but she wasn't out there alone for long, because you'll see next. That's me, and that's Hallie Efron in her cape, and her husband Jerry, who has little vampire eyebrows that you can't see. Okay, and the next one. Lots more dancing vampires. We had so much fun with Charlaine. And the next one, just to give you an idea of the different costumes, the vampires and werewolves of level best books. So that anyway was a look back. That was
so much fun.
Okay, thanks, Bob. So I want to have you talk a little bit about the experience of your books going to television, because you've had 3 different series picked up by 3 different channels. And what has it been like to have so much of a bigger audience than a cozy mystery author might expect, and high points and low points?
Well, there are plenty of both. I never expected my career to be like this. This has been a total surprise and joy to me. I've met a lot of people I would certainly never have met if I hadn't signed the deal with Alan Ball. That having been said, I wouldn't have had a lot of the bad experiences I had too. So I've got to say the whole thing was a big learning curve. You have to learn how to fend off the anger of people who believe you're responsible for the television series content. And I said, I just do the books. If you want to complain about the TV series, go to somebody else. But in my case, it was a huge financial blessing because I had my own screen every show from the books by Charlaine Harris.
Oh, fabulous.
And it turned out, since the show was so popular, people saw that screen and they bought the books, and that really made me exponentially more bankable. It was incredible. It was a wild ride.
Yes.
I got to go places I never thought I would go, walk a red carpet, do the press line, which was extremely scary. And I'll never wear shoes like that again either. But I got, it was fun. It's always fun visiting the set, seeing how these things work. It's just very entertaining to not be responsible for that, but to get to sit back and watch and observe. Like Midnight Texas only lasted 2 seasons, which I really regret because I thought it was great. And I had a wonderful time on the set. But of course, True Blood lasted 7. And the Aurora Teagarden movies, well, number 18 was just on Sunday night. So yay.
Yes. So all 3 of those series, they went beyond what you had written so that other people were now in charge of the storyline.
Yeah, you have to accept that when you sign on that line, that's what's going to happen. And you have to make your peace with that before you sign, because afterwards it's too late. You miss a lot of the fun, and you would miss a lot of the money if you didn't sign. But on the other hand, you would never have to answer a million questions about why Aurora Teagarden's wig is so bad.
And so fans were writing you individually, and did you feel like you had to answer all of them?
Well, I have an assistant, and she feels a lot of stuff, and people know it's her. They know they're not talking to me. I answer questions on my Facebook page, my professional page. And if somebody comes to my website, which is getting pretty rare, most people contact me on Facebook.
Right.
Then I'll certainly be glad to answer questions there. I've never just turned away someone unless they were extremely rude, and that is fortunately super rare.
Oh, good. Well, let's switch to something else, which is to talk a little bit about setting, because your books are mostly set in the Deep South, Louisiana, Texas, Georgia. So I wanted to hear you. We can tell from your accent that you're a Southern lady, to hear about how important that is in each of these series. And do you know each of the places that you set a book in, or do you research them after you decide that's where they're going to be?
Usually I've been there, or at least in the area, and then I do a lot of research to make sure I don't necessarily think you have to follow every city street accurately. But if I'm in a real town, I don't want to say anything that isn't correct either.
Right.
Like the Gunny Rose book, she goes to San Diego in the 3rd book, and I did a lot of research for that about San Diego in 1935. And luckily, on eBay, I found a map of San Francisco in 1935 from Beacon's Moving and Storage Company.
Well,
Yay, you, Beacon's Moving and Storage, because I could look exactly where things were, because that's about the time the book takes place. I could find out exactly where things were and make it a little more credible to anyone who really knew San Diego.
Well, what's coming through is how excited you are about each piece of the process, which is, I think, part of why you can last as long as you have. But in one of the interviews, you told a story about a short story that you wrote for a Bill Kreider anthology, and how you wrote the story and then you gave it to your 2 friends, who I'm guessing were Tony and Dana.
Tony and Dana.
And they essentially said, well, that is a story. And it reminded me of, I was writing a short story that I hoped would get into the Mystery Writers anthology. And I sent it to my pal, Hallie Efron. And she called me up and said, I don't like it. Your characters come across like wallpaper. So she was right, and yeah. I fixed it and it got in. So that's what I wanted to ask you about, your process for getting feedback and how you incorporate people's comments.
I'm real selective about who I ask. My husband is off the list because we have to stay in the same house together. And I can be ridiculously sensitive, though I try to hide it. Tony and Dana, we've been friends for a very long time. And I know they'll tell me if something's wrong, and they'll do it in a really tactful way. And I do the same for them. So we've been really invaluable to each other through
Yes.
these many years. I trust them. I trust them as writers, and I trust them as people.
As friends too, because I know there are people who don't want anybody to look at it before they send it in, and to me that just wouldn't work, because
No,
I need the feedback.
I do
Even if
too.
I don't believe in that what they said is right, you know that something is wrong right at that place that they've put their finger on, and then you can fix it.
They've really helped me so much. I'm really proud of that story now. Their comments were just right on and really helped me. Honestly, I just love that story now.
Oh, good. Well,
I really felt like I did exactly what I set out to do. And I think that's all a writer can go by. After you read that work, do you feel like you achieved your goal? And sometimes the answer is yes. And every now and then the answer is no. But I always do the best I can at the time.
that's all you can do.
That's
You
all.
mentioned somewhere that, and maybe this is not true anymore, that your favorite book is An Ice Cold Grave. So I don't know if that's still true, but I was curious to hear about what about that book, what you did in that book that you were so pleased with it.
I did something that I really flinched at doing. A lot of times when I think about a plot development, every now and then I think, no, that's too bad. I just can't do it. Well, that really means I ought to. That really means I ought to take the challenge and do it, even if it is an awful occurrence and really sad. And in this case, it was the death of a child in the book, but it was a pivotal point in the book, and it was really serious. And I didn't try to make it anything but terrible. And it really, I was really kind of proud of writing that scene and how it turned out.
Okay, well, that's interesting. I wouldn't have predicted that about it. I see we're getting a pile of comments, but I have one more question that I want to ask you before we go to those. We'll have Emily come on. But we were conversing by email about this event tonight, and I was struck by something that you said. You said, my book just got bumped back to November after getting bumped from February to August. I am really unhappy about this, but there's nothing I can do about it. On the other hand, I've tried a couple of new things, and that's been fun. So to me, that in a nutshell probably sums up why you have been able to keep going, because this is a hard business, but you have a good time and you're not afraid to try new things if something gets delayed. And if you could talk about that a little bit, and also if you can tell us anything about those new things, now I'm dying to know.
Well, I wrote I don't really know what to call it. It's for a podcast, but if this were 30 years ago, I would call it a radio play.
Oh.
You know, because they wanted me to write this for they're kicking off this new series, a company called Realm, REALM, in case my accent makes it not understandable. And they wanted me to write the kickoff play. And I thought, but I haven't written any, I've never done things that were just dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could indicate what sounds, but it's just like writing the graphic novels. The artist is going to draw things and you can't write them. You can't write movement because the artist will draw that.
Uh-huh.
And gosh, it took me forever to get through my skull. Old dog, new tricks, you know. But since I did do that, Chris Golden was a huge help to me, huge help. Since I did do that, I thought, well, I can do this if I can just write what the characters are saying to each other and have the graphic be the rest of the narration, then I can write this with just the sound effects and the voices. And so it was an interesting exercise. Now they say they really liked it, but they haven't gotten back to me with revisions. So I'm kind of gonna withhold my relief until I get it back and they say, oh no, this needs to be 10 pages longer, you know, or whatever they say.
Okay. All right. Well, let's invite Emily on and have her ask some questions from your rabid fans.
Hi, Charlaine. Nice
Hey, Emily.
Well, first of all, we have a couple of, some of us missed the title of the short story.
That's because I didn't.
Because we didn't say it. No,
I didn't say it. I think, okay, this is terrible. I think the title is just Aunt Tally, Tally. And it's in the commemorative book. All the stories in that book are so good. It was in Bill Kreider's honor. Bill was a friend of mine and a wonderful, wonderful man. And I was thrilled to be invited to contribute to this anthology, which I will let you know the name of sometime.
yes, that's okay.
Maybe we can include that in our post.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, another question we had come in from Linda Daly is, this is for Charlaine, but Roberta, maybe you can answer this too for your books. How do you choose the names for your characters? I know, Roberta, we talked a little bit about this at an event you did the other day.
Right.
And she says the names in Charlaine's books are very fascinating.
Well, the protagonist's name is a result of a lot of thought. A lot of thought. I go through a big process. And the other major characters, I have to go through a similar process because I tend to name characters with the same initial letter, and that does not work in a book. Readers get confused. If you have a Roberta and a Ralph and a Randy, you know, those seem very distinct to me, but they're overwhelming to a reader. So I had to learn to name people with different letters of the alphabet. For tangential characters, I like to use the edition of the paper where they have the delinquent tax report. Because, you know, that can be just a lot of fun. You take a last name here and a first name there, and you end up with a lot of character to the names.
You're getting the idea, Emily. Do not cross her.
I was going to ask, have you ever used, because Roberta's used some real life Key West folks in hers. So have you ever used any real people that you know?
Oh, no, that would be legally actionable.
Well, Roberta gets away with it somehow.
Yeah, well, Charlaine's a little bit of a bigger seller than I am. And I wouldn't kill off somebody, real person, unless they beg me.
You know, but sometimes people bid to be in the books.
Yes.
And, you know, they have to take what they get. Sometimes they die real quickly, and sometimes they come back in another book. And it just depends on not the name, but the character, because I usually change an existing character's name to suit that rather than add in a completely new character.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Another question. Well, we've had a lot of questions and a lot of people popping up about Lily Bard and asking if you will ever revisit her. And Jill asks, what was your inspiration for Lily Bard? Because she could not be more opposite from Aurora Teagarden.
That's true. And I was deliberately trying to write a character that was darker. Unfortunately, I had to draw from my own past to do that. I'm a rape survivor, and I felt like I had some things to say about that.
Mm.
I wanted people to feel like they could report it and have a life afterwards. I did a lot of research. I did a lot. I was a victim counselor for a while. So it was something I felt like I really knew about, and I really had something to say. I don't think I'll ever write another Lily Bard again because I just don't want to revisit those feelings, but I'm really glad I wrote them, and I'm really proud of those books.
And it sounds like people love them too, from the questions we're getting. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. I like to think they meant a lot to not people who not necessarily have been through that, but maybe they have a friend who well, we all know somebody who's been through that. Everybody, whether you know it or not.
Right.
So it's unfortunately very common.
Well, just to lighten things up a little bit, can you introduce your little friends behind you? And
Well, this is Roxy, my grand dog.
Mhm.
And this is, you can't see Colt, but Colt is the dark and white dog. He's very old. We adopted him. And then that's Abigail. You can hear barking outside. And she's mostly corgi. And we've had her for 7 years. She's probably 9, I guess. Colt is more like 12. So, and Roxy is very young, so she energizes them when she comes to stay with us.
I was telling her, Emily, that I threw everyone out of my room because they don't just sit on the floor. They want to be right in the action.
Well, there's been some action. I mean, they've gotten feisty a couple of times with some toys back there. Okay, we've got some more questions. So you spoke about you have more of a, you want to see what the characters are going to do. You know, you don't use an outline. And one of our board members, Pat Kennedy, writes, if you make it up every day, do you ever get trapped into a story corner that you can't figure out how to get your characters out of?
Oh,
Safely
I
out.
sure do. I sure do. And the thing to do then, as I've found out, is back up like 2 steps. I mean, like 10 pages or whatever 2 steps means to you, and restart because you went wrong somewhere. You took a little wrong jig where you should have jogged. And you need to,
You mean you throw out that whole 10 pages?
ooh, I wouldn't go that far, but you have to find out where you went wrong and rewrite it, or the
Right.
rest of the book just won't flow.
Won't work.
Yeah.
Or do you ever use it somewhere else? Like maybe you just need one thing to get you there. Do you ever just delete, or are you always holding on to it?
Mostly I delete it. I don't think my prose is that deathless. But most of my stuff is very particular to the character in the series. If I thought I'd just written a wonderful essay about the meaning of art in life, I would save that.
Way back when you might do that. Who knows?
Who knows?
And so you said you get up and write 6 pages every day. Is that right?
And that's getting harder. I'm 70 this year and I'm feeling it. I had COVID. And that just slowed me down incredibly. I'm still not back up to speed. So I think getting 6 fresh pages done a day, if you look at it that way, the Gunny books are about 300 pages long. Theoretically, I could have a book in 50 days.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not, but I could if I really, really concentrated.
Uh-huh. And just another little writer question. So how long does that take you? Is that like an hour or grinding 12 hours?
No, because I used to be able to work straight through, but I no longer can do that. I have to write a page or two, take a break, page or two, take a break. I'm really tired of this and I really want it to go away. I'm not sure if it will or not.
Oh, the being tired part.
Yeah,
And
the lack of focus.
yeah. Well, we hope it does.
Yes, we
Yes.
do.
Yeah.
Well, on a similar process note, do you know since you've written standalones and series, are you surprised at what it's going to be, or do you know at the beginning of the process what your goal is for that, a series or a standalone?
Well, I don't often know how long the series will run, especially in the case of the Sookie books, because I originally signed for one book, then they came back immediately and asked me for 2 more. And then before those 2 were published, they came back and asked me for more until the big meeting where, we had to go to the boardroom and there were just 4 of us, and I thought, oh, this is going to be great. And it was. It was really exciting at that level. It was just great. After all those years of getting, $4,000 for a book, it was fun. But I did not know how long the series was going to last, and I didn't plan on it lasting that long, is the point. Not my secret dreams of riches. But I thought, but I can keep on writing these for a long time. And I had a great time doing it. But I concluded when I realized I was no longer excited about starting another book. And I thought, okay, it's time to close the door. So I did. And it was hard, but it was right.
Uh-huh.
Well, we have a question from Dawn who says, would you ever consider writing a book of short stories to check in on characters, since you said you like to look in on them?
Oh, that's an interesting approach. I had never thought about that. I have written a lot of short stories, probably, I don't know, 50, something like that. And every now and then I do look in on a character. I just wrote a short story for Dana Stabenow's women's retreat.
Uh-huh.
I donated that, and it is actually a Lily Bard short story.
Oh, there you go, for the Lily Bard.
But I don't know when it'll appear or in what format, but I'll certainly let people know on my Facebook page when that happens, because I did want to see her and see what she was doing. And that was a story that Dana and Tony's input was absolutely vital for, because it wasn't really much of a story. And when they pointed that out to me very tactfully, I thought, well, you're right. I really need to develop this, and I need to kick my brain into gear. And eventually it turned out to be a pretty good story.
And just to let people know, Dana Stabenow's writing retreat is in Homer, Alaska, right? And
yes.
she puts people up there. So
Women.
To benefit that. That's wonderful. Okay, what else do you have, Emily?
Well, since we got back onto Lily Bard, just real quick, somebody's asking, where did the name come from? Since the protagonist, you said you do put quite a bit of thought into their names.
Well, I wanted her to, she's very tough, very strong, very resolute. I needed the Bard to tie into the series, which are set in Shakespeare, Arkansas. Bard, Shakespeare, see? So
Yeah,
subtle.
we got it.
So subtle. And I wanted her to have a delicate first name to show, in my mind, that indicated that she wasn't always like the way she is when the book opens.
Interesting.
It's like, hint, hint, she wasn't this way forever.
Yeah.
Okay, we have just a couple more questions. Do you think your COVID experience is worth writing about?
Gosh, no, how boring. I mean, it's just, I had it like a Christmas, the first Christmas that we had
early.
and my husband and I were quite sick. But we didn't have to go to the hospital, thank God. But it was just a miserable experience, and it took good 2 weeks to get over the worst of it. After that, there was just the lack of energy and the dragging. And honestly, I have to say, I still have some lingering fogginess and dragging from it.
So not writing your experience, but is your current writing, do you want COVID to be mentioned at all, or in your fiction, do you just pretend like it didn't happen in the world?
Well, since I'm writing books set in the 1930s, the
Easy.
Gunny Rose books, but they had the Spanish flu.
Yeah.
Right.
So I got to talk about a pandemic anyway.
Okay, well, we've got one more here. Well, actually, we got two more. You talked about a little bit about your, getting that second book. What did you spend, Julie asked, what did you spend your first advance on? Actually, that'd be a good, fun question for both of you.
Oh, gosh.
I can remember what I spent mine on because I don't know if we knew each other. I was writing a golf lovers mystery series. And I took that first little minuscule advance and bought a spot to play in a professional amateur tournament, which my character was going to.
Oh, you.
So that was fun.
I think, no, I don't remember. It was too long ago. I remember the third or fourth book, I got enough to buy a new van, and of course, things were a lot cheaper then. That was the dark ages. And I felt really proud of myself.
Yeah.
And I always felt good if I could pay for Christmas.
All right, we got one more question here. Annette asks, what is your process for revision? Especially and I'm adding this as a sensitive person.
Okay. I do a lot of revision. To me, that's where the good is in the revision. I revise a little bit constantly, but I start my working day by revising what I wrote the day before and smoothing it out. And then before I send the book, when I do finish it, to Dana and Tony and then my agent, I do a lot of revision. A lot of smoothing and what I call decorating, which is just making things a little more fun and prettier. And then I try to cut out the dead wood. Nobody wants a whole paragraph when a sentence would do, unless you're really short of your word count. But still, you got to make everything productive. Everything has to work. All the people in the book have to work. You can't have dead wood in there, either in the form of a character or in the form of too much exposition.
Right.
Lots of trimming.
So I have another question for you. Oh, wait. So Charlotte's asking the question, do you have plans for a new series?
No. I don't. I mean, I came up with Gunny Rose, and I still have one more book to write in that contract because I had a 5-book contract. And I'm working on the 5th book now. So we'll just, once again, I'll reach that exciting point that I reached after I finished Sookie, where I didn't have a contract for anything with anybody. I was scared to death.
This is new times now.
Yeah.
You've written a lot of books. Here's my last question, unless someone else has one. You have so many books you've written. If someone hasn't read anything by Charlaine Harris, how do they figure out where to start?
It depends on what they like to read now. If they like cozy mysteries, obviously, Aurora. If they can take edgier stuff, the Lily Bard books and the Harper Connolly books are edgier with a bit of woo-woo in them. If they don't mind full-fledged science fiction, urban fantasy, then of course the Sookie books are where most people start. And I feel really good I enjoyed writing the Midnight books. There are just 3 of them, and I intended for there to be only 3. And it does have supernatural in it, but it also has characters from every series I've ever written.
Oh, that's cool.
just so I could see what they were doing.
And I should say that your supernatural stuff is not a gimmick because the characters all are wonderful characters. So
Thank you. Thank
That's-
you, Roberta.
do we have anything else, Emily? Or we worn her out?
We'll just sneak in these last two because they're
Okay.
pretty similar. Just if you had a favorite book as a child and most influential writer that kind of got you started.
Oh my gosh. Well, the book I read most as a child was Jane Eyre, Charlotte Bronte. That was real. That has everything. It's got the mad woman in the attic. It's got the orphan with the terrible childhood. It's got the plain woman marrying a man of wealth and substance. It's got mysterious relatives. It's really an amazing book. Every time I read it, I find something new in it. And I believe that book is the seed from which the whole romance industry sprang.
Uh-huh.
It's just everything. Books that have influenced me greatly, so many, too many to ever give them credit. I do read a lot, and if you ever want to know what I'm reading, it's on my website under book and blog. You can tell everything I've read for the past 4 years. I don't know why you would care, but
If you do.
if I've read it and enjoyed it, it's on the book and blog.
Wonderful. Well, Charlaine, it's been such a pleasure to have you, and we thank you for your time and hope we didn't wear you out.
No, Roberta, it's been so much fun seeing you again after all this time.
I know. And well, so come down to Key West and we'll have a special event based on all these interesting books. And
Oh, I would love to. I'd love to.
maybe next year.
That would
All
be
right.
great.
Thanks so much.
Oh, thanks for inviting me. See you later.
Yeah, and don't forget, Charlaine's books are available through Books and Books, and we will see you next week. Thanks so much, everyone, for coming.